All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Accuracy in America. This is episode 187. I'm Don Irvine, joined by my co-host Brian McNichol.
Good morning. Hello, deplorables, drags, despicables, chumps, Neanderthals, and those dog-faced pony soldiers.
That's right. All right. So you are now back in your home. Where did you say you celebrated New Year's? You were on the freeway or something?
Right? You're coming up 81. You turn on 66 to come towards DC. We were just about to that exit when New Year's arrived. It was a
Who?
long drive back, but it was a fun trip. And part of what the delay was a girl that I had coached is now playing in college, and we had a chance to see her play. And so we stopped in Montgomery, Alabama, something called Huntington College, and watched their game. And she was on the road team. She plays for Emory in Atlanta. So, it's a girl that's like, I talked to her. She's from Bolivia, and her dad he understood soccer, right, but he didn't understand basketball. And he's like, he told me, he said, if she goes on this team and it doesn't work out, I was trying to talk him into playing AAU basketball. I'm like, that's the spring and summer, right? So I'm like, he's like, you'll knock her out of soccer. The coach told her if she doesn't stay on the team, he'll never take her back. And I'm like, well, there's a lot of soccer coaches in the Naked City. This one don't want you, someone will. And B, she's not coming back because she's a good player. And she was a good player, and she still is. And she's really gotten good at it. So that was fun. The other thing I want to cover last week, though, before we move on.
Sure.
You asked me about Harry Reid, and I gave a quick answer. And I had actually read some of the stuff that was written after he died. And I was kind of taken aback. There were a lot of Democrats, when he's comforting them about, I wouldn't comfort anybody about it or whatever. But there were a lot of situations, a lot of people just spoke up with stories of him being decent to them. So, they're Democrats. He wouldn't give us the time of day, but, to his own people, he appeared to not have been, a complete monster. So I didn't want to say that there were a lot of people out there who had stories to tell of him being a decent guy.
Yeah. I mean, and I think there's, like with a lot of people that you and I know just from politics in general. I mean, because we watch them politically and whatever, we know what their political behavior is because that's a public thing. What
Right.
we really don't know is really a lot of the private stories and the one-on-ones. And this goes for anybody. I don't care. It doesn't matter. It doesn't make a difference about the race, color, creed, party, all that kind of stuff. This happens with everybody, I think, that we know, and we find out a lot of things about them. And look, I've always felt, and not everybody agrees with me, but I mean, Sam Donaldson, for example, I mean, he made a career, of Mr. President, right? Reagan, with the helicopter and that whole thing, and the conservatives I knew always thought he was a rude, boorish kind of a guy, and all of this kind of stuff. But I think there's a flip side to him too, that sometimes we got to see that a little bit, like at certain things and interactions, other interactions at say CPAC, where he wasn't quite the same. I mean, he he would play some of those things up to a certain extent, but there were other times you say, yeah, no, look, there's a human being there. Remember that, and this is all part of him. But sometimes they are, because of their political position or whatever. They are going to be doing certain things all the time, and that's kind of how we see them in a lot of those ways. So I
Yeah,
don't
it's
have.
like you're talking about that Jim Acosta
Oh
during
yeah,
the 2020 campaign. He would go into these places and while he's on camera, the whole crowd's booing him and all this stuff, covering Trump, right? But when it went off, like he went and talked to people in the crowds, and he had a lot of good interaction with that. A lot of people talked about that. Like he would just wade into these crowds of conservatives, and they would be taking selfies with him, and you know trading talk, not necessarily having a conversation, but trading talk. So, when you pull up the curtain, some of these people, I don't want to gratuitously trash anybody, but, some of them even on our side, when you meet them, your views of them go down, right? You look at them and say, okay, the way they treat people, I don't want, that's not my buddy, right? But there are a lot of these people on both sides, that at the end of the day, they are decent people, and it's important to try to acknowledge that when it's happened. That's why I wanted to right at the top say that I got that wrong.
Okay. Well, that's good of you too. I mean, one of the reasons that I brought up Sam Donaldson is along the same lines is just that Donaldson had actually pushed to continue doing the appearances at CPAC, I guess, with Bob Novak. Look, I mean, there's nothing really in it for a guy like Sam Donaldson to go into the lion's den to do that, right? But I think he also wanted to show people that I'm willing to do this. I can dish it out and take it and do all this stuff, and it kind of gives another side. Ted Turner's another guy that I have probably a different opinion than a lot of conservatives would, because my father's dealings with him were quite unusual in the sense that going to a shareholders meeting before Turner got swallowed by AOL, that whole mess that happened in the end, my father had asked him to come and do the CPAC alternative that we were helping run with Morton Blackwell and Paul Weyrich at the time. And he's at a shareholder meeting, he said he couldn't do it because he was too booked up, but ask next year. Well, when somebody says that to you, you're like, right? And then lo and behold, at the following shareholders meeting, Ted Turner says, hey, so, when's the date for this next thing? He remembered this. And, he not only came, I mean, this is when he was still dating, he had Jane Fonda on his arm, right? And that was an amazing day because people were still, I still remember people couldn't believe, Ted Turner was there, Jane Fonda was there, Bernard Shaw was there, Larry King was in the audience, all these people, and you're like, whoa, what happened? Did Turner, change anybody's mind politically? No, because his speech was really not that good. But you got to give the guy credit for actually reaching out and saying, yeah, look, I've taken a lot of brickbats for the conservatives. I'm going to stand here in front of you. So you got to give these kind of people credit for that. And yeah, you're right though. Look, there are some people that their behavior, their public persona and their private persona behavior are exactly the same, if not worse.
Yeah, right. And this, personalizing this thing takes the edge off the debate. It allows real discussion to happen, right? Because then you kind of know the person. Like you say, the next time you see them, they're further along the path, right? Of having a conversation, not changing their mind, but having a conversation, right?
Right.
And that's vanishingly little going on in America now, right? Like essentially, if you say anything to or at AOC, this means you want to date her, right? You're just frustrated, right? That's what she said. But I mean, so we can't talk to her. There can't be dialogue between anybody on the right or even the center right, and AOC. She won't talk to them. And if you try to talk to her, she will say something silly out of it, and you won't, that will end the dialogue, right? So it's like, how do you break through? How do we ever get a moment of Swalwell's time, or him get a moment of our time to try to convince us, right? It's like he's shut out. We can't debate him. He can't debate us. We can't debate AOC. She can't debate us. Maxine Waters, we can't talk to her. We possibly could talk to Pelosi, right? But I don't know what would come of it, but I mean, she has negotiated in the past with Republicans for stuff, right? But I mean, that's part of this is we can't even have these conversations,
right? Well, that's extremely true. I mean, that there's less of that kind of conversation going on, or our ability to have it. I mean, and it is, kind of it's talking about just kind of a societal mark now of this is where we are going. I mean, you and I we have to watch everything that we say and do, as innocent as some of the things are, because of the reaction from other people about things that are going on there. It's like all eyes are on there. social media, with people, with everybody's got a pretty much a a smartphone and everything like this. It's almost like you're under constant surveillance,
Yeah.
and you do have, and the littlest thing, even an offhand comment or something that was said innocently, very easy to take that out of context, and we've seen that happen numerous times. And once it's misreported, it's really hard to dig yourself out from that.
Right.
It just makes it very, very difficult. Yeah, the whole AOC thing, since you're there, before we go on to some other things, that is just, I don't even know how to describe, with AOC. I mean, it's, what her thing is that, I mean, I think she does have this thing where she wants to kind of, she doesn't want to talk to us. She wants to battle with us. So therefore, yeah, I mean, she's a heavy user of social media, and she uses it pretty well. But the thing about social media that also is the downside is that you can easily be drawn into arguments and to saying things that are just really dumb, and just make no sense whatsoever, because you want to keep a conversation going, you want to have a battle or whatever. There isn't any redeeming. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing that anybody really gets out of this. But yeah, I mean, she this whole sexual frustration thing tweet. I mean, that was really just. I think even some liberals probably cringing, like, what is the deal with this? Is like, about all of that. Yeah, look, I guess you could say she's an attractive person and everything like that, but I don't think that there are conservatives that are fawning over this whole thing.
Right. I don't think anybody's sitting around wishing they could date her. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, because, if you find her attractive, which wouldn't be unreasonable to do,
Right.
then you would say, okay, but that's still not somebody I could probably get along with if you're a conservative, right? Because, she's pretty serious about her views, But the other thing is like seriousness. That's a particularly unserious person to be in Congress, right? Of all the people you've dealt with in Congress, no one, how many of them are tweeting about people want to date me, right? Right. That's little kids stuff, something you would get from a high schooler.
Yeah, and I mean, legislatively, I mean, what has she really done? I mean, this is the thing. Her accomplishments in Congress, she rattles the cage. She bugs the heck out of the liberals because she wants a more leftward tilt of everything, and things like this. But from an accomplishment standpoint, I mean, if she was to run and be judged solely on her accomplishments, running for office, there isn't anything that I'm aware of.
Not a whole lot there. Yeah, that's right.
I mean, it's she's a backbencher who makes a lot of noise and attracts a lot of attention. But she also has a social media timeline, I think, that is replete with kind of goofy, head scratching statements as to, and once again you wonder, it's like, why is she in Congress?
Right.
But,
right.
Look, I don't. She's there. She's elected. The vote. Her district elects her. So that is the system. So be it as
her district might not exist here.
Right.
One of the plans to redistrict New York, they lost 2 seats, right? 2 congressional seats in the census. One of the 2 of the plans, I think, put her out of business, or force her to another district.
Yeah, I mean, the redistricting will reshape Congress to a certain degree, though we haven't seen all the maps yet, so we don't really know exactly what it really looks like. But there are people running in different districts now because of the maps that have come out. They're trying to find places that do, and we're seeing the political partisanship. I mean, the Republicans will try to squeeze the Democrats for the most part, and I think the Democrats will be much more partisan in trying to squeeze Republicans out in areas that they control than the Republicans doing that much to the Democrats. Which, I mean, I know you've said this many times. I mean, look, elections have consequences. I mean, you win the election, you get to have all the rights and privileges, et cetera, that go along with that. But the Democrats, they don't always seem to be. I mean, they seem to be very much on revenge and, vilifying things. The Republicans tend to take a lot more sanguine approach to a lot of these things. And then you're like, yeah, but in some ways, I understand that in some ways, but if you're not going to play tit for tat, you may lose the long war because the other side is going to continue to do one thing. And if you're trying to be reasonable and they're not trying to be reasonable, it's not even.
That's right.
Yeah, it's just not even at all. All right, I want to talk about this snowstorm because of just the insane thing. Okay, now
there's a lot of insanity with this snowstorm. It doesn't seem like it would be big enough to generate as much insanity as it has.
Right. No, I mean, that's exactly right. I mean, I'm sitting, you know where I live. I'm up in Montgomery County, and I think we measured out at about an inch and a half where I am. And it varies, that's probably on the lower end. Other people I know there are people in, in the Fairfax area that might have had 7 inches. And
we had 6 here, down county, like Annandale had 11.
Yeah, so, I mean, there were some. Southern Maryland had 15.
Yeah, there were some big pops down south, further south of people.
Right, and I was, I always get a little skeptical about predictions about snow because you just never know until you wake up the next morning exactly what it really is going to be like a lot of times. And then I woke up and I'm like, okay, so it's coming down, but it's wet and it's heavy. I went to the gym early. Roads were slushy, but it was fine. And I thought, the schools had already closed, and I thought, for this, but then it just it got a lot worse, and I thought, okay, so they made the right call. I will give the school system, Montgomery County in particular, at least, for making the right call. But what happened in Virginia on I-95 was totally insane. I mean, really, I realized there was a tractor trailer accident or 2 things that happened there that created this problem. But how do you have people trapped for like 26, 27 hours? I mean, Senator Kaine is trapped in his car. I mean, and it's interesting too, because for me, here's Glenn Youngkin almost ready to take over. he's probably glad that snowstorm happened before he's officially the governor.
Yeah, but I don't know if you saw this. There was a lot of Twitter traffic. People saying, they told you that you shouldn't elect stupid Youngkin. He does nothing to help these people. Like, well, he's not in office yet, so he kind of can't help. Jonah Goldberg was out there. Youngkin should be out doing this. It's like, come on, Jonah. Like, he hadn't been sworn in. So, that's part of it. I mean, I guess he probably could have said, hey, Governor Northam, they appear to be fairly friendly terms. Yeah. McAuliffe too, by the way, appears to be trying to help, help where he can as well. So, it sort of makes it look sort of Virginia way-ish to me, which is not what we thought hoped we were electing, but remains to be seen. That no one, for instance, how did they let cars keep getting added to this, right? Once this is happening, don't you block the road and make people get off at the last exit? And, people who don't know, US 1 runs parallel to 95, all the way from here to Richmond, much further south and much further north. But from here to Richmond, US 1 is just at the most about a mile from 95 running parallel. So you just get off and get on US 1. That's a long, miserable trip too, but it's not 19 hours, right? So, how did this not happen? How did we not get some command and control? And, Governor Northam got involved in like the 14th or 15th of the 19 hours and started trying to do stuff. But, he was asleep at the switch here, and there's no, doubt about it. It's his last days, and, I guess he's got 10 more days that he's governor, or 9 more days after today. And they weren't ready, and they did not leap into action to help. There's various scenarios of what people are like, what could they have really done? Well, one thing, you don't let anybody get added to it. Like, the problem is only this big, and it's not going to get any bigger. And then you can start extracting people from the back of it, right? Having people back up. I mean, it's not safe to back up on an interstate, unless the cops have the roadblock, and in which case you can do whatever you want, right? So, I mean, a lot of things that could have happened did not happen. And, I'm sure there'll be after action report. Of course, a lot of people also pointed out, this is interstate highway. So it's federally 90% built, 90% with federal funds, maintained 90% with federal funds. Where was the federal government to marshal some resources on this? Of course, the transportation secretary, was off doing childcare or whatever it is he does.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you've been around here a long time, and I don't pay as much attention to things that happen over there in Virginia, except when they become headline things like this. Do you recall anything like this happening in that area before? I mean, we've had lots of snowstorms, but it just seems that this was about the worst thing I can recall seeing over there. That the thing they should have had other ways of doing it. I think you're right. I mean, having Route 1, parallel, they could have taken action. Yeah. Why did you?
It's an artery. I mean, it's a security feature of the East Coast, right?
Yeah.
Evacuation route and so forth. I don't ever remember. Obviously there's been some wrecks. There's been some, days when 95 was a headache, but I don't remember anything like this. I don't remember anybody ever being trapped on that road like that for that many hours.
Yeah, frankly, I don't know how they all managed to make it through all of that. I did see somebody on Facebook who asked a question about EVs, what happens to the EVs that are trapped in there. And I thought,
right,
well, that's kind of an interesting question because, I mean, they need electrical power. They have, when they're charged, they'll give you 200 to 350 miles, depending upon the vehicle and things like this. But, the weather was cold. If you start using your heater, you now start draining your mileage, your potential, all your range out. So it's like
you're losing it because it's cold, right? And batteries don't do as well in the cold anyway.
Right. Yeah. It takes more on top of that. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think this is yet another part of that, the flaw in this overall, this grand electric strategy here. I got to say too, my head was about to explode the other day when I was listening to my tech podcast, and some guy had called in relating to like EVs. I think he was looking for a car or whatever. And he was asking about, I think he was thinking about, doing something like a plug-in hybrid or whatever, or what, thing like that. And, the host is a liberal. And he just was like, he's like, the oil companies is like everything they talk about, they just want to keep, they just want you to keep buying oil and doing this. So everything they're saying about, anything they say about renewable energy, it's all propaganda from their point and stuff like that. It's like, no, it's not. I mean, there are issues. I mean, okay, let's talk about what happens when the wind doesn't blow. Exactly how much electricity you're generating. Let's look at.
Hey, here's one like right along those lines. Okay, the battery in your car weighs about 65 pounds, right? Your car battery. The battery in an electric car weighs about 1,100 pounds. So that's about a third of the weight of your car, right? Is the battery. Okay, and you need less engine, right? You're not just spacing all this air through a combustion engine and so forth. But 1,100-pound battery, and it lasts at most 3 hours, right? So that's what you're up against in this, and that's not going to change. I don't think you could put a much bigger battery in there, a whole lot more storage capacity in the car, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how much more battery could you fit under the hood of these cars? So,
yeah, I mean, that's the challenge. That's part of the challenge. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on. You and I both can see just the amount of money and amount of excitement about, battery factories and all of these kinds of things. But they still haven't, I still haven't seen enough here on the electrical grid and exactly how they're going to do this. We're already seeing, Europe, when they talk about, how energy is going to go, for the next 20, 30 years, they still talk about nuclear energy, which the Germans have been trying to run away with, which has just shot up their energy prices for the consumer. But France relies heavily on the nuclear industry, and
Germany just shut down.
They've been shutting down under Merkel. I mean, it's
insane. And by the way, so I told you, a lot of my players at TJ are they're in something called Model UN, where you go and have these UN style debates. And one of the questions they're dealing with this year is whether nuclear energy should be considered renewable energy. And, I mean, there's arguments either way because it's no emission, or it's not much emission, right? It's, you can't even barely measure the emission from it. But, you extract something to make the rods, and then you must dispose of the rods, right? So that's not really renewable. That's not really wind and, wind or sun, right? There's differences. So, but that's what they're dealing with. That's what the kids are talking about.
I mean, if they're looking, I mean, there was something I think I saw in the Wall Street Journal the other day talking about, there's some European climate plan, maybe EU thing or something or other, and nuclear energy is actually in the plan. But and the Greens, I guess, all the far left, they've agreed to put that in there with something about, what was it? It has something to do with like, as long as the plants are like up and running by like 2030 something, and they have a plan on how to dispose of the waste or whatever, it'll be part of the renewable process, And I'm like, this is what they have to do, because the reality is that they need it, right? It's like they have to have that. They have to have that, and they actually have to have some. They have to have some natural gas, and things like this. There are harsh realities, and particularly in Europe, in terms of there are limitations as to how they're going to be able to generate the energy there. It's they're not humongous continents. I mean, they don't have land and a lot of other things available to them to do.
They don't have a lot of oil. They don't have a lot of. They can't really drill for their own.
Right.
And offshore is problematic for them. I guess in the North Sea they drill for a lot of oil, but I mean it's just not where the oil is, right?
Right.
And so you have a lot of people, densely populated. It's old infrastructure. So like when you're heating houses, for instance, in England, it's a lot less efficient than it is here because a lot of the houses are hundreds of years old and weren't built, with all those kind of things in mind. So
they're a little drafty.
Yeah.
It's not kind of hard to take those castles and figure out a way to plug all the holes.
Yeah, I mean they're sort of ahead of us in a way on this, and their leftists have convinced their people to really take some bold steps in this direction. And what they're finding out is, we're right not to do it. Basically, right? You have price and supply instability. You have a lot of England now that the pretty cold winter over there, who can't get power now. You're back being vulnerable to the Russians, because Biden immediately approved their pipeline and killed ours. We went from energy independent to begging OPEC for oil. We got knocked. We were on that throne and we knocked ourselves off by design, and we get nothing in exchange for it. Nothing.
Yeah, I mean, Europe better watch out there with this whole Nord Stream deal and all the stuff with Putin, because
you're about to be under the influence of Russia, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, it's like, do you realize that you want to be fully reliant on your energy, your heating and things like this to Putin and to Russia?
Yeah. You signed up for it. You did it voluntarily.
Yeah, I mean, Merkel's a big cheerleader on this, right? She was a huge cheerleader on this. So it's like this, they're sowing the seeds of their own destruction, if they continue to go along this rate. All right, Biden. So there was a CNBC poll that showed that he continues his disapproval ratings continue to tick up. Whether or not it's just the overall disapproval for his performance, the handling of COVID, handling of inflation. I mean, they're just, they're not really any good numbers for Biden anywhere on this. It just, nothing seems to work for them right now. The news just continues to get worse for him. And, here we are. I mean, we are just about 2 weeks away from year number 1 in office. And it's been a pretty miserable year if you're the president. This is one of the worst starts, if not the worst start that I've seen in my lifetime. It's pretty bad.
So I track the Rasmussen daily poll. It's taken using the same methodology every day, and so you can kind of compare it across time. You can individually argue. You can say, okay, well, that's if you think there's conservative bias in that poll, you want to like add 2 points to Biden and take 2 points from Trump, whatever. It's the same poll, over and over. So Biden has not been above 43 on that poll since September. He has been at 41%, which is pretty darn low. That's right at your base. You're going to get 41 almost no matter what you do. 20 days. Trump was only at 41, 18 days. Biden has been at 40%, 8 days. Trump was there for 3. Now, Trump was also below 40 for 5 days. He was at 39 for 4, 38 for 1. And Biden's never been below 40. But he has already racked up as many days below 42% as Trump did in his entire term. And, this is a long, deep slump that will take a lot to climb out of. And their things are, investigate J6, berate Manchin for not rolling on their radical leftist voting bill and build back better and try to hope the Fed can save them on the inflation, right? They're not for anything that's going to change that trajectory. I'm curious, like what do they do? What are they talking about over there, to change this? Because the things that pushed it down remain in place, and the things that push up ratings seem a long way off, to say the least, right? You have had some stabilization in energy prices. They haven't gone up a whole lot more lately. The White House says they've gone down a little bit. I'm kind of having a hard time finding that, maybe a nickel a gallon. But if you make it go up to $2 a gallon, you make it go down a nickel a gallon, me and you are still friends. You know what I mean? You still have some work to do. So we have, some. I think he's down. He can't really stump for anybody in the midterms, right? Who would want him in your district, right? If you get that inkling, you should call Terry McAuliffe and ask him what he thought of bringing Biden into the campaign, because it didn't work all that well for him. And these things are, the economy is bad. It's on an inflationary track. There's too much government spending, too much government money in there, right? At first, it kind of made sense because people could not work, but now they can work, and you're holding them back and artificially pumping in money. You had the most people. Would you have 8 million people quit their job in November? The most people ever in 1 month. Okay, that's not getting people out of the workforce. Is not good for the economy, and is not good for the general health of the country. What are those people who were spending 40 hours a week at work, another 20 hours commuting? What are they doing with all that time now? You got 60 extra hours a week. You don't have to go anywhere, so you can stay up all night, right? What are they doing with that time?
Streaming.
Yeah, I mean, you get into a lot of, the leading cause of death in the country for 18 to 64, it's not COVID, it's fentanyl overdoses, right? So, that's what's happening to that extra time is deaths of despair. I mean, you got to get people working. Trump was right. Buy an alarm clock.
Yeah, there's something to be said for that. I mean, just the economy has been, changed dramatically since the start of COVID. I mean, and we're, by and large, we sensible people understand where the heck we are in this whole thing. Others are still they're still, panicking at the drop of a hat for every new variant and everything like that. But, a lot of America's working stores are open, restaurants for the most part open, as long as they can find people to work, they can open. People were traveling. So there's a lot of things that seem to be a lot more like 2019 than 2020. But we do still have this lingering issue about all of these people who want, who've decided to quit. What are they doing? It's, my son out in Arizona, he's he continues to kind of poke around and look for maybe better opportunities within the state government, and he's finding himself in somewhat of a demand because I mean, it's a supply and demand now thing. It's like he's been working for a little while. He's shown that he's more than competent, and so he can try for some other positions that might pay him a little bit more money, and things like that, or might be more interesting for him. Those positions had been shut out a couple of years ago, but they're there now. And there are more people that they probably could use more people, but they can't find them. Other people have decided, I don't want the rat race anymore. They've done this, they've done that. It's just, I don't know. I was so this morning, for example, not sure it's a perfect example here, but I had a friend of mine who needed to go for some outpatient surgery, and that whole process was a lot longer than I expected. I drove him down to the place, and then I came back for a little while, and I went back at the time that he had told me yesterday that they thought he would be ready. And of course he wasn't ready. I was waiting another hour. I'm thinking, like, am I going to have to text Brian and say I'm coming late? I don't know what the heck is going on. But he was saying that his one of his sons, who was a landscaper, that's the thing he really loved to do. He had actually quit that and gone to work for the school system in Montgomery County for a while doing maintenance. And then he quit that and went back to landscaping. But his partner works for the school system. And, last year, because of COVID, because of remote learning, he says they moved to Florida for a while.
Yeah.
She's a Montgomery County school teacher. She was in Florida. Now they're back now, and everything because of in person, because they had to go. I went back to the classroom, though we're seeing obviously now the switch is going back the other way again. But it's just, there are still certain things that are just kind of crazy. There are people who just look. I mean, the school system, and maybe the same thing's happening in your neck of the woods, but we know in Montgomery County, they can't find enough substitutes to keep things going. Right?
Big thing down in Fairfax too.
Yeah, I mean, and I think this has been somewhat of a nationwide problem. People who are more than willing to do a lot of these jobs before, they're like, "Yeah, I'm not. I'll find something else to do. I'll sit at home."
Right. And once you get people in the habit of sitting home, it's very hard to fix that. It's very hard to get them to go back to work and to make them productive again. Your skills aren't up to date.
Example of that.
Yeah. Yeah, me too.
You don't have to drag me kicking and screaming to go back to an office now. I'm just kind of like, I'm heading into that sunset period, and I'm like, I'm just fine now, and whatever value I brought to things or could bring is going to be lost in a sense, because it's just like I'm not as interested anymore. It's like I'm okay. I will find a way to survive, and people have learned to adapt. Part of that was the government money that got the people on the lower end to that, like, okay, wow, they were able to pay. The other thing too is that Biden continues to extend the student loan payments, right? So as long as there's a moratorium on that, people are using that between the unemployment money and all the stimulus money. They have paid off all kinds of debt. There's, as long as those payments aren't due, it's not another thing hanging over their head. A lot of people are just like, they're doing lots of other things. I mean, I'm reading stories all the time about people like, they've got that deferment. So in the meantime, they're doing ABC. I'm like, but at some point in time, that's going to come back. Then what are you going to do?
Right, because you think the Democrats are in trouble now. They try to come out. I guess the moratorium's extended till May.
Yeah,
they try to come out in May and pass legislation to forgive student loans. I mean, it could be 400 Republicans in Congress next year. That was not going to fly, right? Not under the present situation.
Yeah, mathematically, we may not be able to get there because of the maps, but wouldn't that be?
That be put a scare into people,
Well, look, I mean, shoot, I mean, if you got to even 250 or 260 Republicans, the liberals in the media would just have, I mean, they would be apoplectic. They wouldn't know what the heck to do at that point.
That's right.
I mean, that would be such a wipeout for them. It's just, they know that their Democrat agenda would be dead for a long period of time. The only thing about Republican majorities is that they're very good about not taking full advantage of that and then handing it right back to. It's like, so that always worries me in the back of my mind. It's just like, we can gain control. We got some good things going, and then we just seem to lose our way a little bit. And then, the Democrats come back, and, it's like, so I don't know, but that's politics, right? I mean,
Democrats right now are saying, we have all this stuff and we're not taking advantage of it, right? So, I mean, it's the same kind of thing that's happening. So, they're all griping that we're not doing it.
So here's something from Bob, which actually, that's an interesting question.
Yeah, that's right. Because that's the key to the deal is the enforcement.
Right, right. So we'll wait and see. I mean, you have a bird's eye view of this whole Model UN thing and see how that goes. I mean, we used to they used to have it was I guess it was what they call it, the Junior States of America used to invite a lot of conservative groups as well as liberal groups to come and have like a little display table every time they had their thing in Crystal City, and we'd go there. And there's high school kids basically doing, they come as they're set up as representatives and senators, and then they try to pass legislation and do all these kinds of things and stuff like that. Interesting group of kids, very smart kids, but the more liberal kids that would attend that thing would make my head explode at times. It was not easy times to get through, sitting at a table having to deal with some of these people for an hour or whatever it was. All right. January 6th, you mentioned J6 really briefly earlier. So that's the anniversary tomorrow. Thoughts? I mean, look, my thing here right now is just that I'm sick and tired of all of this stuff. I'm sick and tired of the investigations. I'm really sick and tired of just about hearing it. And I just kind of always worry that the liberals are going to always bring this up. Every year it's going to be a never-ending litany of things that we're going to hear from. It's always going to be a way back to bring Trump back into the picture, vilify Trump, and a lot of Republicans and like this. There's a lot of bad things that happen on that day. There's a lot of things a lot of stupid people did a lot of stupid things on that day. But I just wonder sometimes whether or not we're really going to get past that, or the political, things that are going on in this country will always keep that alive in one way, shape, form, or another.
I look at that commission like a snowman, right? And the weather's warming up and that snowman is just melting down to the ground, right? Slowly but surely, all the energy of the snowman is going out because, one thing, they don't really have any enforcement power. One of the things they're finding out is, they ask for documents they don't really have the authority to get. You even have the Biden White House saying, helping them preserve Trump documents now because the requests have gotten so out of hand. Okay, so Congress is not, an investigative body. Congress cannot do investigations just to, quote, find out what happened. The only reason Congress can investigate something is pursuant to legislation. Like, we're considering legislation, we're looking at how a law is doing and do we need to fix it, right? We're considering repealing a law and we're trying to see if it's necessary. But just to, go out and do fact finding and, criminal probes type stuff, they're not allowed to do that. We have two branches that can deal with that, the judicial and executive. And so they know this. And so, like, for instance, when they request these phone records, right, they've sent preservation letters to the phone company saying, these people on this list preserve all their records, right? And don't tell them that they're on the list and you're preserving their phone records because we might need them and we might ask you for them. And if the person finds out and says, am I on there? Then they just take them off. Well, no, you're not. Because you got yourself off the list by asking about the list. But if you don't know the list is out there, you don't know to ask, right? There's people on there that they have no idea they're on there or even why they're on there. So, it's that kind of stuff. It's that kind of chicanery that they're having to pull to do this, right? And for what? What are you going to get? At this point, you're going to get, there's 1,400 hours of videotape that Nancy Pelosi yesterday again refused to release. So, I mean, people know it's a whitewash. People know that it's completely partisan, right? So whatever you get out of it, however much truth or not truth is there, it's tainted. It's not going to be productive towards anything. Maybe the Capitol Police fix themselves a little out of it. But, it's not, what they're trying to do is not right. And it's not necessary. We know to the extent we need to know what happened. The FBI has already told us there was no conspiracy to overthrow the government. Trump had nothing to do with it. You know, he gave a speech, and what he said was, you know, we want to walk down there, we want to look at these guys, and we want to, you know, see if they will go through with doing this with us standing there watching them. And that's what they did. And some people went in the Capitol, and if you trespassed, you should be punished a little bit for trespassing. If you attacked a cop, you should get whatever punishment they give for attacking cops, right? You don't get a license to attack cops or destroy property because you're in a protest. Okay, the left does, right? But they shouldn't. The answer is not two wrongs, you know, don't make a right. So if you did this, you can expect to be punished. And given the heightened circumstances and the fact that all these cases go through an Obama-appointed judge, you're going to get as strict a sentence as they can come up with. So, you know, if you did it, that's your thing. But if you are a protester, I mean, they're trying to criminally prosecute the people who voted for the voted against the censure resolution, right? I mean, that's 140 Republicans, and they're saying all these people are criminal co-conspirators because of how they voted on a censure resolution. So, I mean, that's way over the top. That's way past political dialogue, right? That's way beyond, let's debate whether there was a protest, right? There was no insurrection. It's like you were saying, we don't assert ourselves. We didn't assert ourselves in the battle over language on this, right? We let them call this an insurrection. The government hasn't even charged anybody with anything remotely related to insurrection. We had no weapons beyond a couple of pocket knives, right? No plan to take over the government, no plan at all. Such that a plan was executed, it appears to have been, you know, government provocateurs doing it, right? And now I guess you have some people, I guess some of these oath keepers, people who have been in prison since January, solitary confinement for this, haven't even stood trial. Their lawyer has said, you know, we want to know about these alleged government informers, and they've named some of them, and they've figured out who they are. Ray Epps is one of them, but there's a few others that they've identified who they are, and that's coming, right? The court's going to have to rule on, do they get access to these people, because, you know, those people, whatever they did, whatever their role is, and if, you know, this comes back that, you know, FBI provoked this into happening, we need to know that.
Yeah. No, I mean that's true to that extent. Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about the extreme partisan nature of this, and, you know, I think, you know, if the Republicans do take over Congress in the fall, like we expect them to, that, you know, if the commission hasn't died by then, it will die in the next Congress. You know, it won't exist. And
right, they want to put out an interim report in the summer to sort of cover that, get their piece said before they're vamoosed.
Yeah, right. And you know, it's just the Democrats once again just continue to, you know, they do these things. They're trying to get some political capital out of this. They think this is a good thing for them politically to make these moves. But I think every time that they do stuff like this, I think it only hurts their cause, and, you know, it takes their focus away from their agenda, which I'm not really all that against, because that makes them even more.
Agenda's terrible. Yeah.
So but I think it is emblematic of the fact that the Democrat Party at this point really doesn't have an idea what they really should be doing, or what to do and how to accomplish it. And you know,
right. And the thing at the end of the day, you're right, is they've got a bunch of big problems going on at the same time, and they don't really have a plan to solve any of them.
Right, and that's being reflected in the polls. It's, you know, we'll see the results of that probably really in November too, with the changes that we're expecting to come in November. Marjorie Taylor Greene's been banned from Twitter. I'm not a big Marjorie Taylor Greene person to begin with. I don't read anything that she's said on Twitter at all. But I find this interesting because it seems that just a little that I've seen on this is this, there are liberals, there are people to the left that are very upset with this. They're upset with Twitter. They're upset with big tech about this. I think even my liberal cousin's daughter, I think on Facebook, she said she was leaving the platform or whatever. And I think she alluded to Marjorie Taylor Greene. And I thought, you're the last person I thought would leave a platform, but just kind of like this was the last straw. And there seems to be a backlash, to Twitter for having done this. And I find that to be quite interesting at this point in time. I mean, she's not as much of a lightning rod as Donald Trump, but she says a lot of stuff, and she gets a lot of attention. But now she's been her personal account. She's been deplatformed. Her
Right.
congressional account is still up.
Well, it's suspended. It's still up, but she's under suspension on her congressional account.
Oh, is that the current rule? Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And it appears to be for tweeting out government information, CDC information, right? I mean, it's not, she's pressing her case, but she's using government provided data to do it, right? And if they're going to kick off everybody who thinks the vaccines aren't working right, there's not going to be much left of Twitter at this point, right? Because the notion that we have a problem with the vaccines is starting to reach critical mass, right? That they didn't stop what we thought they were going to stop. They don't indemnify you against giving it to other people. They don't make you less able to give it to other people, and they very well could have some really bad, nasty, long-lasting, challenging side effects, right? I don't know if you saw there was a life insurance guy yesterday. They're looking at these numbers like how many claims they're paying, and they're saying that all-cause mortality in the United States is up 40%. So 40% more people are dying right now than died in a typical month last year when there was COVID. So, that's a stark increase. That's a lot of claims they're paying. So it's time to stop and look at that and see what we're doing. And of course, the president yesterday was, full steam ahead, get your shots, and I think that at some point they're going to have to pull the plug on the full on, the only way out of this is vaccines, and don't use the treatments or the preventions, just vaccine. I think that's a losing strategy. I think, that poll that you mentioned, the CNBC poll, his handling of COVID has gone from 53% approved to somewhere in the high 30s, right? So he's way below halfway now on COVID, on his approval for his handling of COVID. We have twice as many cases right now in the United States as we had last year. A reporter asked Jen Psaki yesterday if the White House had lost control of the virus. And she's like, well, no, we have not. Well, double cases, your vaccines don't work. Your only strategy is more vaccines. So, you kind of have, and I think that they understand that, their big talk about we have a plan to do this without shutting down the economy, they've not been able to deliver. They have not kept their promises.
Yeah, well, I mean, my thing always has been is a mistake about the vaccine information really is more of people. You can manage to convince people that the vaccine is the panacea. It is actually the thing that prevents you from getting it. It's a cure, and it's a vaccine. You get a flu shot every year. A lot of people do get flu shots every year. It does not say that there's no guarantee that you won't catch the flu, but it lessens the probability that you will in a lot of people. And everybody's physiology is different. We do not know how everybody will react to different things. And we have seen there's just a lot of attention being paid to COVID, the vaccine, because of the nature of what we're going through. So people are analyzing everything to death. We're seeing all these things, but I don't see that the physiology of everybody. We're getting a lot of variances. Some people react badly to it. Some other people are fine with it. Yes, you can be a healthy athlete and be vexed and boosted and still get it. I don't think that's a huge deal. That doesn't shake my confidence in the vaccine at all. I just think that there's just too much fear mongering and too much misinformation about how this is supposed to really work. All this COVID hysteria lately is just kind of nutty. I mean, people think, I had one of the friends I had said, Yeah, they had a family gathering, and so his wife made an appointment after Christmas to go get tested for COVID. She wasn't feeling sick. She just had a bunch of. She just wanted to be sick. It's like, well, this is why you have lines. It took her 2.5. She had an appointment. Took her 2.5 hours to still get tested. This is why you have lines out the doors and people trying to get test kits, and there are no test kits available because everybody panicked. They thought, oh, we've got to, this thing is sweeping through. We've got to get tested. If you're not feeling sick, if you're not feeling the symptoms, why are you going out there and doing all this stuff? There are people that probably need the test, but you are not like, most people do not need it. I mean, look, I still have the remnants of a cold from last week. I had a feverish kind of thing for a couple of days. I've had that dry cough and stuff like that, but I didn't lose my appetite. I mean, I felt okay in general, like bounced back, just took care of myself. I'm fine. I didn't, I wasn't thinking like, I don't think I've got COVID and I'm not going to get tested for it because it looks like just a bad cold. Hello, but people are now being convinced that stuff like this, oh, I've got COVID, and then they test out negative, and they're like, darn, I was sure I had it.
Like, right, but if you're you, right, and you have a mild case, then what difference does it make whether it was COVID or the flu, right?
Yeah.
This shot is being presented to us as akin to a smallpox vaccine, where you take one, you're not getting smallpox, right? Smallpox is out of your life. Okay. It is more analogous to a flu vaccine where, it's not going to work every year and not everyone needs it. And, it might or might not hit the virus, as the virus is presenting itself, right? It might be inaccurate, right? Because sometimes the flu vaccines are inaccurate and they don't really prevent much flu at all. And sometimes they're really accurate and they prevent a lot of flu, right? They do a lot of good. And it varies from year to year because the people making them are guessing, right? Well, the people are guessing at this. And, I was reading back on some stuff today. When this came out, they were promising 96, 94% efficacy. If you 94%, if you took a 94% chance, you were never getting COVID. And now, more than half of these Omicron cases, and like in Canada, places where they actually keep the statistics, it's 80, 90% of the cases are vaccinated, fully vaccinated, boosted, whatnot, right? It's overwhelming majority vaccinated, right? And so if all those people standing in line have been vaccinated, which I assume they have been, because if you weren't vaccinated, then you're not obsessed enough with all this to go and get a test when you don't feel sick, right? So right, I mean, right. So if all those people are going and get tested, and there's all these positives, and the government sits there and tells you, the president tells you yesterday, this is the people getting sick are the unvaccinated. Okay. All these people in this line are vaccinated, right? So the people getting sick, the people popping positive are vaccinated, right? Because that's who's standing in the line taking the test. I mean, we can all see that on our TV. So I don't know where they're going with this, but I think that we are reaching, he said last week, he said at one point, this is a state matter and the states need to start figuring this out, which was what people like me and you have said all along. And I think they're going to start tilting that way because A, they don't have an answer, and B, there's a good chance one of the states might happen upon a better answer, and C, they're getting killed on this. Their candidates can't talk about this, can't talk about the biggest issues of the day, the economy, the border, or the COVID on the campaign trail because they're getting slaughtered on all three.
That's right. All right. We've spoken a lot, but let's go for 2 minutes and wrap it up.
2 minutes. That was it. I want to do. So Betty White will be missed. What a wonderful personality. Brave. She was one of the first people to put Black people on TV, right? And people complained about it. She's like, sorry, but tough. He's good at what he does, right? And that devilish grin, I think we'll all remember that forever. And I want to say, Dan Reeves passed away, who played for the Tom Landry Cowboys, coached the Broncos to the Super Bowl, coached the Atlanta Falcons to the Super Bowl, and coached the New York Giants. Man, no one can get to the New York Giants to the Super Bowl.
Not these days.
Some things are kind of a heavy lift. But he passed away. A good football man, a good football life.
Yeah. Yeah, the only thing I love Betty White. I mean, obviously, we're old enough that we've spent a good portion of our lives, getting to know her in various aspects. Funny lady, just really charming and everything like that. I just, once again, I wish the people wouldn't. There was a lot of speculation at the end. It's like, oh, she got a booster and so she died from that or whatever. Her PR people, everybody said, no. I'm like, my thing for this was just that she was 99 years old. Okay. Can we stop with a conspiracy about COVID for 99-year-olds and let's just let it go?
Yeah. I mean, you don't know, but at 99, there's a variety of things that can bring you down.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
So one question for you, who do you like in the big game, Alabama or Georgia?
Boy, that's tough. We're talking game number 3 between the two of them, right? They've split it so far.
They've only played once.
I thought they played earlier this year. They didn't play earlier this year?
Alabama's only got one loss. That was to Texas A&M.
Okay. All right. So I stand corrected on that. I'm still gonna lean Alabama, but yeah, I know Georgia played really, really well in that those college football playoff games. It's like, why are we playing those when they keep going to be blowouts? But hey,
yeah. And somebody raised this point to me yesterday. If the average margin of those semifinal games is 25 points of all the semifinal games since they started doing it this way, like you can't expand if you can't even find semifinalists, right? You don't need 4 more teams in this.
Yeah,
I mean, you got too many already, right?
Yeah, Rob, yeah, that's what it's. See, this is the problem for me, is that it's hard to vote against. It's hard to kind of root against Nick Saban in the sense of just go against him because he's been so doggone successful. If there's a coach that will pull out another championship, it's Nick Saban. But I don't want to underestimate Kirby Smart, and the Bulldogs are good.
Right, they're good, and they have a lot of seniors. They have a lot of 22, 23-year-old guys who've been through this before. But Alabama's Alabama, and Nicky is Nicky. And I don't see
but it is hard to imagine that Georgia will wind up playing a game like they did in the championship game.
Right.
I think it's gonna be, if anything else, it ought to be a much closer game and real dogfight, hopefully.
And Cincinnati deserved to be there more than Michigan did. I mean, Michigan was blown out from the start.
Yeah, they made some bad decisions, and it was just that'll yet another thing for Harbaugh to worry about.
Yeah, the other thing to be pointed out, and then we got to go, is the Big Ten, the Big 12, the Pac-12, and the ACC did not produce a single team that belonged in the playoffs. Not one among all those conferences. So we definitely don't need to be expanding it.
Yeah, I would agree with that at this point. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed it and got a little of our football talk here at the end. We got the big game coming up. Please, as always, stay safe, stay well, stay healthy. Remember, we live in the greatest country in the world. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. God bless America, and then we'll see you again next week.